Okay. Cool. Yes. Hello, everyone. So baking powder alone as the bread. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, we'll talk about that. Hello to everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Tuesday at 6:30 PST, cooking through. Usually, most of the time, we'll be cooking through the recipes that just came out over on the YouTube channel, which is where some folks are watching right now. If you haven't checked that out yet, definitely hop over there. We have those new recipes. They come out every Friday, so lots of new stuff coming out. Last Friday, we came out with this recipe. This is the recipe for this salt and pepper fish, which can be done in many different ways. Personally, I think, at least I think, that because I see it of the way that I see it presented so often, when they say salt and pepper, what they're actually talking about is the inclusion of salt and pepper as in hot peppers, like chili peppers. So today we're going to do that with a single jalapeno and then a couple other Thai chilies, but you can do it with really whatever kind of pepper that you want. So anyway, if you have any questions, feel free and drop those questions in the chat. As always, I don't know everything about salt and pepper fish, but I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful. Yes, Jason. So Jason is asking, is using baking powder alone as the breading, is that super common? So I don't know how common it is. I have seen it a lot. I think I will say is I mostly see it come up in deep frying. So that's usually where I see it more commonly. Today we're actually not going to do any deep frying. We're going to be shallow frying, but the same concept still applies. And essentially what's happening is when we add baking powder to a breading, it acts in the same way that it behaves when you add it to a baked product. So if you were like baking a cake and you add baking powder, what that baking powder is doing is there's alkaline in that baking powder. The alkaline causes the cake to rise, and that's how you get that nice puffy quality to it. So in that context, if you were to add it to the breading, of something that you're deep frying, it should hypothetically help create more puffiness, so it will like cause it to crisp up. You'll get nice little bubbles. The more common way that I've seen it done is usually with fried chicken. So the reason that it was on my mind when I wrote this recipe is because the day prior I had shot the recipe for Korean fried chicken, which is one of the recipes that came out. I think that was out 2 weeks ago. And in that recipe we did a very, very simple breading, which is kind of iconic to how Korean fried chicken is done. And it's, I think in that breading was just cornstarch. I think it was literally cornstarch and a little bit of baking powder. And I feel like we even stopped there. So essentially what's happening in that scenario is the only thing that is causing that fried chicken to puff up is that baking powder. So you get a couple of things out of that. Number one is that you get a nice crispy piece of fried chicken. But number two is the other thing that you get out of that is that there's no wet element to it. So usually, more typically with fried chicken, you would see that done with, say like in a southern fried chicken, you would do that with like buttermilk. You might see like an egg wash. Sometimes you'll just see it with water. Essentially something, some form of wet element that is causing that to combine with that dry element. So what we got when we did that with the fried chicken is you get, so there's very, very little liquid when you're entering into that fry, which means that you can achieve a crispier piece of fried chicken since your fryer oil is not actually expending any energy to cook off liquid. It's just frying chicken. So you're not, say like with a tempura batter, which what we're doing today, you might be expending energy cooking off the egg, basically, or cooking off some form of liquid. Actually, we're not doing a tempura batter today. the reason that I included that baking powder is because it was basically just top of mind when I was making fried chicken prior to that, and I don't know that it's necessarily super important to this particular recipe, and the reason for that is because this particular recipe also includes an egg, which is going to achieve the same thing. The egg is going to puff up in our fry, and then you get this nice piece of like puffy fried fish. So in that respect, I actually don't know that it's necessarily essential. You could do one or the other. You could do both, which is what we ended up doing. In any case, they are essentially serving the same purpose. Good question, though. Yeah. The only reason that uses potato starch as its breading. Yeah. So that is super common in like a lot of Chinese cooking. Is that it's just like one very, very thin form of, I don't want to say flour, but like essentially flour. So in today's recipe, we're doing that with just cornstarch. Hopefully, I might not have enough cornstarch. I forget if I bought more cornstarch. Did I buy more cornstarch? Yeah, I did. Yeah, so today we're going to do that with just cornstarch. With a chicken karaage, you might do that with potato starch. In Chinese cooking, I see 3 different starches used like interchangeably, and usually those are cornstarch, tapioca starch, and potato starch. Sometimes rice flour too, which are all essentially, they're serving the same purpose. They're like a very, very light form of starch that you usually, more typically in Chinese cooking, you would use that to like thicken up a sauce, but you can also use it in fried breadings and stuff. In Chinese cooking, I see them like used really, really interchangeably. And even like when you're in the Chinese grocery store, you'll see them all next to each other because lots of times, like if you can't find cornstarch, you'll buy potato starch instead, and it's essentially doing the same thing because it's flavorless and it has the same kind of like quality of starch to it that we're looking for. So even in like the grocery stores, you'll see the grocery stores will put it next to each other because they know that people use those things interchangeably. So today we're going to do that with cornstarch, but if you don't have cornstarch, you could do it with potato starch, you could do it with tapioca starch. If you don't have any of those things, you could even just use flour. That would be fine too. Kind of unintentionally, but because we didn't technically use any flour, the fact that we used cornstarch and also we don't have any soy sauce in the recipe today, that actually makes our recipe gluten-free, which was not my intention, although some people have been asking for that. But if that's what you're looking for, though, that's a really great way of making a gluten-free piece of fried fish or chicken or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, the yellow container. You're starting to think that no other brands of cornstarch is. Yeah, actually, in Chinese grocery stores, I never see the Argo cornstarch. That actually, so what's in that container is not Argo cornstarch. What you'll find, I actually don't have one because I always throw it out. But when you're in Chinese grocery stores, you never see Argo. What you'll see is usually it's a brand called Kingfish, which is just like Chinese cornstarch. It doesn't mean anything. Ooh, I just cut myself. It's just the one that you see in Chinese grocery stores for whatever reason. So I just cut myself. Be right back. Anyway, yeah. I always thought that was interesting. Usually when you find cornstarch, it's like anytime I see it in the liquor stores, actually that Argo I buy, and I don't get it from the Chinese grocery store. I always buy that from the liquor store, which is where you see Argo. But when you find it in Chinese grocery stores, for whatever reason, I don't know why this is, but for whatever reason, Chinese grocery stores don't stock Argo. I don't know why. It's very confusing. But yeah, usually in Chinese grocery stores you see a brand called Kingfish, which I thought was weird. Probably different like supply chains. That's probably it. Yeah. But yeah, the reason that I have that Argo container is because Kingfish. Literally the only reason that I still have that is because Kingfish cornstarch is sold in a box, an unsealable box, which seems like a dumb way of selling cornstarch. So I always just put it back into this container. All right. So anyway, back to that long digression. But back to our fried fish. I'm starting off today we're actually doubling our recipe. So that was 8 cloves of crushed and minced garlic. This is going to be 2 inches or about 2 tablespoons of finely minced ginger. If you're not doubling your recipe today, I'm cooking for 4 people. But if you're not doubling your recipe, this should be 1 inch of finely minced ginger or 4 cloves of garlic. All right, so there's our ginger. Cool. So today, by the way, our salt and pepper fish is a really, really simple recipe, which is one of my favorite parts about it is that it's so simple. So the fact that it's so simple kind of has this effect about it that sort of makes everything like more highlighted. So everything about every ingredient that we're adding is going to have a lot more quality and presence to the dish that we're creating because we're only using a handful of ingredients. So that means like really, really fresh ingredients are going to be really, really important. So today we're using the only 2 vegetables that are included in our recipe today are a couple of peppers, and that's really about it. So today I'm going to do that. That's going to be this is a single jalapeno. What I'd like to be using is 2 jalapenos, but I forgot to buy 2. So here we are. What we're going to do is, if you particularly don't like spice, you could pick some of these seeds out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick all of these seeds out, and then I'm going to leave the seeds in on my Thai chilies. If you love spicy foods, you can leave everything in. That would make it very, very spicy. So generally, I should say, generally speaking, the goal here is depending on how spicy you want your salt and pepper fish, scale this part up and down. It's also, by the way, when you're in a restaurant, you ask them to can you make it a little bit less spicy when you ask for that? This is the part that they're dialing up or down. All right, yeah. So that's our jalapeno, and then next I'm going to do, this is going to be 3 Thai chilies that I'm chopping up here. And as I mentioned, our Thai chilies, we're going to keep these seeds in. The reason for that, mainly because I want it to have a little bit of heat. And I actually think that a de-seeded jalapeno really has no heat to it at all. That's the reason why you can do like jalapeno poppers, which is essentially just a hollowed out jalapeno with cream cheese in the center, is because when you take the seeds out of a jalapeno, it doesn't really have that much heat at all. So and usually I'll even substitute it entirely, but I have this jalapeno to use up. I like supplementing it in this particular case with a little bit of Thai chili, and that's going to bring us a little bit of heat. So last up here, this is going to be a little bit of cabbage. We don't need a lot of cabbage. We're actually not even going to be eating the cabbage. Really, the only purpose of our cabbage today is to provide somewhere for the fish to land. So when we plate it up, it's going to be sitting on top of the cabbage. And it actually, even though we're not technically eating it, it actually serves a really important purpose, and that is that the oil from the fish is going to be caught in the cabbage. So that's really, really important. Without the cabbage, it would basically just be sitting on the plate. And if it was on the plate, you would end up with like a really, really soggy piece of fish, which is never good. We did something pretty similar. We did the chicken katsu, and we did something similar with that. You plate the chicken katsu on top of a bed of cabbage, which is how we keep it from like turning soggy. I'm just going to use this up. Oof. Yeah, or fish. So last up, in the original recipe, I had done this with the original recipe catfish, I believe, and actually that was actually a substitution on its own too, because I was originally looking for tilapia. But today I actually couldn't find catfish either, so I'm gonna do it today with some salmon. I don't think that I would recommend using salmon for your own attempts because salmon has a completely different texture and quality to it. Usually I like to look for some kind of white fish, so tilapia, cod, catfish, any of those will probably work okay. I have never tried to deep or shallow fry a piece of salmon before. Usually I would do it in like a pan fry or something. We did this something similar with the miso tacos, miso fish tacos that we did a while back. I can't even remember this. So we'll see. Not a substitution that I would recommend, but and I mentioned this in the original video too. What's by far a lot more important than the type of fish that you buy is going to be the quality of fish that you buy. So whatever it is that you do choose to buy, just make sure that it's nice and fresh. If it's not fresh, then we're going to have a lot. That's going to be a lot more detrimental than if it were. I'm just gonna leave that skin on. If it's not fresh, that's gonna be a lot more detrimental than if you have the wrong kind of fish. I think this is gonna fry up just fine, in fact. All right. How old is this knife? Yeah, that's a good question. Lots of people ask about this knife. I think it is something like from sometime in the 70s. I think that's when it was sometime in the 70s. I think. I think it's like 70 something. I looked it up at one point. It's from the 70s. I got it at an estate sale quite some time ago. I just decided to take the skin off here. Yeah, I got it at an estate sale quite a while ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it's yeah, it's been basically the only knife that I ever use, other than like a paring knife, yeah, other than the paring knife that I use. It's pretty much the only knife that I'll use. Yeah. Fried salmon nuggets. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, also, so one of the things that I always advocate by is to leave the skin on of the salmon, which I realize that I'm actually cutting the skin off right now, because I don't think that it's going to work really well in our context today. But the reason that I always advocate for the skin, leaving the skin on of your salmon, is because what you should be doing with your salmon is pan frying it. So if you pan fry this stuff, and that skin will get nice and crispy, which is real nice, a real nice quality to have. And you get this nice, really crisp quality to it. Lots of people are afraid to leave their salmon skins on because it's like kind of chewy, or it looks kind of chewy, or it looks just really gross. That's actually the best part of the fish, if you ask me. All right. What am I gonna do with the skins? Yeah. Well, at first, I'm kind of going back and forth right now. I think I might actually just leave it on. I think I'm just gonna leave it on. I love pan frying salmon skins. It gets like super crispy. It's also where all of the fat lives, so you get this nice crispy quality to it. The problem is, and the reason that I want to pull it off, is because we're breading it. I actually don't know that we're gonna get a lot out of the salmon skin. Because of how it's going to be prepared, which is another reason why I would actually prefer to be working with catfish or like cod or something else, something whiter. But here we are, we're using salmon. And I think I'm just going to start leaving it on. I picked some of it off earlier, and then I just changed my mind. So yeah. We were told not to eat the skin after baking it. I wonder if that's because it like starts to like carbonize. So essentially, what's happening after you bake the skin is basically burning. So like you get like black. So that's like blackened fish. It's essentially burnt fish, which is technically bad for you, but also it's kind of the best part. You're missing out on a lot when you pick that skin off. So I guess eat it at your own discretion. But it is the best part of the salmon. You're missing out. You're gonna eat it next time. Yeah, nice. Let me know how it goes. Definitely like sear it. Throw that onto like a grill. I liked it, so we did a whole recipe on this. We did some like miso salmon tacos, and we shallow fried the salmon. But in that shallow fry, it didn't have a batter or a breading. It was just like lightly glazed with miso. So we did like a miso glazed salmon, which is really, really tasty. So I'm not sure how it's gonna play with our breading today. So we're gonna do this cornstarch and egg breading. I'm gonna say that it's gonna work out okay, but again, salmon nuggets will probably be fine. It's gonna be tasty. Ooh, yeah, leave it on, yeah. Yeah, Happy New Year, hello. Yeah, Happy New Year, everyone. By the way, Happy New Year, everyone. It is Chinese New Year here in Chinatown. By the way, the reason that I have salmon today is because I forgot that the spot that I buy salmon from is Chinese owned. And here in Chinatown in Oakland, everything is closed. There's not a single shop that is open, which, by the way, if you're in Chinatown, there are only like maybe 2 days out of the, really just 1 day out of the entire year will you ever see those shops closed down, other than like sometimes they close on weekends, but most of the times they don't. And really the only day out of the entire year where you'll see Chinatown shops shut down, it's on Chinese New Year. And for whatever reason, I forgot that the place that I buy fish from is owned by a Chinese family. So I had to go to a different place. And they didn't have catfish, so no, I'm working with salmon today. Do I ever make poke salmon? Oh yeah, that's been on my to-do list. I've been like sort of poking around for like a good, like price-effective source of salmon. This was pretty expensive. This was like probably not something that I would buy again unless I like had a good reason to. I think this was, so I just got, this was 2 pounds of salmon, and I think I paid like $30 for it, which is like, it might be comparable to what you buy at Whole Foods at a certain point. Yeah, that's been on my to-do list. I also like, yeah, I'll have to look into it. It's been on my to-do list for a really, really long time. It's not really in my wheelhouse, which is not a good reason not to do it. But it is definitely the reason why I haven't done it, because it's not really in my wheelhouse and I would have to invest a lot of time into doing it. So again, dumb reason not to do something. Yeah. You got raw salmon from Costco. Yeah, it's I found that like actually my parents, well, in Hawaii you buy a lot of poke from Costco. You buy some really good poke from Costco, but when you're not in Hawaii, some of this is like excess of skin, so I'm cutting off some of this, by the way. What am I pairing this with? Yeah, I'm gonna eat it over a little bit of rice, and that's really about it. Maybe with a little bit of soy sauce, but that's gonna be it. So we're gonna do this. I'm gonna pair it with a little bit of like a vinegar-based sauce, and that's really it. So I mentioned this earlier, but my favorite part about salt and pepper fish is that it's really, really simple, which means kind of just puts all of this emphasis on the quality of ingredients. So we've got this really good looking salmon. We have like really high quality veggies that we're using. All of this is really, really important. Whereas like if you were doing like a stir fry, in a stir fry you might be able to wash away some of this stuff and like just sort of covered in like other sauces and just sort of hide the inconsistencies and like lower quality of ingredient. But because the salt and pepper fish is really just fish plus like 1 or 2 other things, there's really nowhere to hide, which means that you better have high quality fish, otherwise it's not gonna taste very good. Yeah. Cool. Alright, so that's our salmon. We're going to do a really quick marinade on this, or marinade sauce, whatever you want to call it. Actually, this needs to be in a separate bowl. So that's 2 eggs to start. I'm gonna whisk this up. The reason that I just did this in a separate bowl is because before these eggs go into our salmon, I'd like them to be whisked up first, which is, I think, a mistake that I made in the original video, which I did not like, and then I had to break the eggs up. Or I think I had to pull them back out, which was annoying. Quarter cup, half cup of cornstarch. That's a lot of cornstarch. All right, so that's 2 eggs to start. Next up, this is going to be half a cup of cornstarch. Followed by salt. Yeah. So here's a healthy pinch of salt. That's kosher salt, by the way, which means that it looks like it's a lot of salt, but it's actually not as much salt as you would think if you were using table salt. So by the way, if you're using salt and you're trying to pinch stuff, generally you want to be using kosher salt because it's going to be a little bit easier to pinch. If you've ever pinched table salt and found it really difficult to measure how much you're actually pinching, that's because table salt has a much larger grain to it, which makes it a lot harder to pinch with your fingers. That's why most of the time you see people pinching salt, they'll probably be pinching kosher salt. Next up, that was some white pepper, which is in pretty much every marinade that I ever make. Finally, the last element here is going to be a quarter teaspoon of baking powder, which, by the way, baking powder has an expiration date. It lasts for maybe a year or so. After that, it starts going stale, and it's kind of just stops doing the most important thing that it's supposed to do, which is create leavening. So if you've got really old baking powder like I do, throw that stuff out because it doesn't do anything after a certain point. I was using some pretty old baking powder. Also, it's really cheap, so there's no real reason why you shouldn't replace your old baking powder. Cool. This feels really gross, but it's going to taste really good. Also a good reason why I should be using gloves, I guess. And also probably a bigger bowl, but here we are. You don't like cooked salmon? Yeah, I go back and forth. I love salmon sashimi, but cooked salmon I go back and forth on. It kind of depends on how it's cooked. I love a good pan-fried salmon though, like a good pan-seared salmon. That's always really tasty for me. All right, so that's our marinade, or I guess you could call it like a batter or breading or whatever you want to refer to that as. We're gonna set that aside. I like to let it go for 30 minutes. We're probably not gonna go for 30 minutes because I'm not gonna wait that long. But ideally, anytime that we're marinating, I like to shoot for about 30 minutes. But also, I don't actually think the marinade is that important today because, I mean, what are we actually marinating here? All right. So last up, we're going to assemble a really quick and really simple sauce. So the key to a salt and pepper fish is that it actually, the reason that we're able to get that presentation of the way that the fish looked, which is just like, it's not even a saute, it's really just like, it's the fish on the dish. And you can even see parts of the fish, is because everything in it has to be really clear. So we're gonna do a little bit of rice vinegar, a little bit of Shaoxing wine, there's some sesame oil, and then a tiny little bit of white sugar. So we're not gonna use anything else that's gonna color our dish. So you'll notice this might be the first recipe that we've done in a while that doesn't contain soy sauce. And the reason that we're not using any kind of hot sauce like doubanjiang or chili crisp oil, we're getting all of our heat from fresh chilies today. The reason for that is because if we added those elements, it's going to color our dish, and we don't want that to happen. So this is 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar. Plus this is going to be 2 tablespoons of Shaoxing wine, which by the way is very hard to pour. Then next, this is a single tablespoon of sesame oil. Oh yeah, where's our sugar? And finally, this is a single tablespoon of white sugar. And again, this might be the first and only time that you have ever seen me use white sugar, because most of the time that we use sugar in a recipe, we usually will be using brown sugar. And that's because brown sugar has a little bit more of like a malted sweetness to it. So it's like a little bit less like aggressively sweet and has a little bit more complexity to it. The reason that we're using white sugar today though is because, again, just like everything else that we're doing here, we're trying not to color our dish too much because of our presentation. So we're gonna set this aside. That's really it. That's all that's going into our sauce today. Which again, if you noticed, that was mostly just vinegars. So when we boil that sauce, or when we add that sauce to our wok, it's gonna be super, super important that we cook it. Because what we're gonna be doing is cooking off a lot of the acidity that comes from that vinegar, which if we don't cook that off, it's gonna be really, really bright and a little bit abrasive. So again, if we were to just like throw everything together and then serve it, there would just be pools of vinegar sitting at the bottom, which we don't want. So we'll get to that in a second. Cool, so over on the stove, I've got my wok. We're gonna get that heated up. That's gonna probably take about 45 seconds or so. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna shallow fry that salmon in batches of about like 5 pieces or so. Anytime that we're shallow frying, we want to do that in small batches because wok will only be able to shallow fry certain amounts. It is always very, very tempting anytime that we're cooking in a wok to fill it all the way up because it's got all of this surface area in there, and it's really, really tempting to just throw everything in and start cooking. But when you're on home ranges like we are right now, it's really, really important not to fill that wok all the way up. You might notice, other than when we're finishing off, that wok has never been all the way full on this home range. It's usually no more than like a quarter full at a given time. And that's because if we were to fill it up, it would be very, very like mediocre heat. We would be cooking on like medium low heat because of the basically like the BTU output of our burner. Yeah. Cool. So, hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Tuesday at 6:30 PST. Usually we're cooking through a recipe that just came out over on the YouTube channel. So last Friday we came out with a recipe for this salt and pepper fish, which I'm very excited for. If you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. And if you're looking for the recipes, definitely head over to the YouTube and check out what's going on over there. Those are out every Friday too. So this Friday coming up, we've got a recipe for Singapore noodles. I think we're doing Singapore street noodles, which is a PF Chang's hammock, which I'm super excited for. Cool. Lastly, if you're interested, head over to the YouTube, give it a subscribe. We're working our way up to 6,500 subscribers by the end of February. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please feed him Charo. He's very hungry. All right, so I'm gonna add, this is gonna be a crazy, it looks like a crazy amount of oil. This should be about 1.5 cups of oil or so. We want quite a bit of oil here, but if you think about it relatively to how much oil you would use in a deep fry, which would be closer to like 24 ounces or so, I actually don't think that this is that much oil because deep fry would be using like 5 times as much. Oh, no, I'm gonna eat. Come on. So real quick, we can take a look at what just happened. So I just put the first piece of fish in, and nothing's happened. So we didn't get very much sizzle going on, which is always a bad sign. If that happens to you, it means that your oil is not hot enough. Probably because we're using so much oil, it didn't heat up quite as fast as I'd like it to. There we go. But if at any point your wok is not sizzling, that's a sign that you don't have enough heat in it, and you should stop doing immediately whatever it is that you're cooking on medium heat, which is never good. right, so there's our first batch. I think we can get a little bit more in there. Yeah, so there's our first batch of fish going in. We're gonna let this go, usually about 3-4 minutes, and then we're gonna pop those out and repeat with our remaining fish. So this batch cook will probably take, I don't know, about like maybe like 3 batches or so. Kind of depends on how finely we chop that fish. Cool. Looks good. Yeah, thank you. Cool. You say leave the skin on, probably yeah, the skin gets nice and crispy. So what I'm always worried about with leaving the skin on when, with like in this case, is that in a breading, I actually don't know that it's gonna get as crispy as we'd like. Worst case scenario, it's just gonna be nice, like a nice bit of fish. But we're not really getting the added benefit of what you are usually going for when you leave the skin onto a piece of salmon, which is that that skin, when you leave it onto the salmon, you can put that skin facing down, and it protects the fish from overcooking. So normally if you were to put that fish into a piece of, like into your wok, it would overcook really quick because fish is really, really delicate. So when you pan sear skin on salmon, what happens instead is that the skin starts searing without overcooking the fish, which is nice. In our case today, because we're not actually searing anything, we're kind of losing out on the benefit of pan searing that skin. But I actually don't think that it's necessarily going to detract from anything. We're just not really going to get the nice benefit of getting that crispy skin. Cool. Is that, no, is that ginger fried that we're frying? No, actually, we're searing, well, like shallow fried. I guess you could call it like salmon nuggets. That's essentially what it is. By the way, I always figured that salt and pepper fish was like just the fish. I never thought that salt and pepper fish would be battered, but after like doing more research, I discovered that it is very battered. That's how you achieve that fish. So I'm pulling our salmon out when it gets nice and crispy. I'm looking at a couple of things as I pull these out. The main thing that I'm looking for is its crispiness, so we're making sure that our salmon is nice and crispy. But the other thing that I'm also looking for is like the general color of what's going on with our pieces of salmon. We want to make sure that those are deeply golden brown. So if it doesn't look quite there yet, don't pull it out. Looks good. Yeah, thank you. I'm very excited to eat it. But the salmon, yeah, the salmon has a batter of a couple of things. Mostly what it is cornstarch and egg. We also used a little bit of baking powder. I think it was about 1/4 teaspoon's worth, which is partially what's helping to kind of get things to puff up a little bit. But yeah, that is where that yellow coloring is coming from, is from the batter. right. So there's our first batch that I'm pulling off. I will show you these in a second while we get our second batch going. Yeah. So there's our second patch going. Meanwhile, let's take a look at what's going on over here. So that's going to take a while, so we're going to take a look at here as our finished salmon. We're looking for this nice crispy quality here on the edges, this nice crisped up edges. That's what we're looking for here. If you don't see nice crisped up edges, that's probably a sign that your salmon is undercooking. So we're on medium, low heat. So you want to make sure that that wok stays ripping hot, otherwise you're not getting crispy salmon. Alright. Oh my god, turn over. Yeah. Cool. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning into one of these streams, we're here every Tuesday at 6:30 PST with new recipes out on the YouTube channel every Friday. So last Friday was the recipe for this salt and pepper fish, which we did with a little bit of catfish, which is generally, I think catfish is a pretty common one to use in a lot of Chinese dishes. I see catfish on the Chinese menu all the time. And that's probably because it's the one that you source in Chinatown the most often. It's also like relatively cheap. If I weren't using catfish, my next couple of choices would probably be like tilapia or like cod. Any of those would be really good. Today we're using salmon purely because it was the only fresh looking fish that I could find. So today we're using salmon. I think that we're underusing a lot of the really valuable qualities of a fresh cut of salmon like we're doing today. I think it's going to taste fine, but we're actually underusing some of these significant qualities of salmon. Most particularly that it still has its skin on, so if we were pan frying it, we would be able to get this nice crispy quality to it. It's also like a little bit more tender, so we don't have to bury a lot of qualities about it in the way that you would with a cheaper cut of fish like catfish. So we paid a little bit of extra, and you're kind of like losing out on a lot of the essence of like what makes salmon so good, but here we are. So for what it's worth, if you're doing this at home, a cheaper cut of fish would probably be just fine, and you would achieve something similar. But I mentioned this in the recipe video too, is if you can't find salmon or if you can't find catfish, what I always recommend is that you should use the ingredient that you can find that happens to be fresh. So don't stick to the recipe if you can't find those ingredients. Find the ones that will make sense for you. If you find the thing that you can find that's fresh, or use the thing that you can find that's fresh. But anyway, I digress. If you're looking for those recipes, they always live over on the YouTube channel. We have those long form recipes. They're coming out every Friday. The short form recipes, so if you're following from the gift recipe subreddit, those short 1-minute recipes, they come out every Monday. And then all of the music that goes on underneath these beats, that's out every Wednesday. So that's all the Wu Cooks Beats stuff. Lots of cool stuff coming up. So if you're looking for that stuff, definitely head over to the YouTube channel, check out what's going on over there. We're working our way up to 6,500 subscribers by the end of February, so if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and subscribe. Lots of cool stuff coming. Cool. Alright. Salmon, by the way, it does not have a minimum internal temperature. Obviously, that's why we can eat sashimi and stuff. So if this was chicken, I would be checking it. We would look for 165 internal. In our case, with this salmon, that's actually not a requirement. So we're not paying attention as much to what the internal temperature is. I'm mostly looking for how it looks, what's the coloring like, how's the texture looking. Because we don't have to worry about making sure that its internal qualities are cooked all the way through. I think we could fit a little bit more into this wok. I might regret saying that, but... yeah, we could definitely fit more. It's possible to cut the salmon skin off and fry it separately. Yeah, you could do that. I don't see a. Well, that was what I had originally started doing. I was cutting the skin off, but then I never advocate for cutting off the skin of a salmon because it's the best part of the salmon. It is the part that will get the most crispy. If there is a textural contrast in your salmon, it's going to be from the crispy qualities of the skin and the tender qualities of the meat. So if you cut off that skin, you're losing the best part of the salmon, which is what most people do. I think when people eat salmon, this is the part that you lose. I don't think that you're necessarily going to lose a lot by leaving the skin on. You're just like kind of missing out on what the best part of the salmon is if you lose it. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I guess we could, but I didn't because I hate cutting the skin off of the salmon. And then somebody asked what I was going to do with the skin, and what I was doing was I was throwing it away. And as I was throwing it away, I was thinking, terrible. This is the best part of the salmon, and I feel terrible about throwing it out, so I'm not going to cut it off. Thank you for stopping me from making a terrible mistake, though. That would have been awful. So our wok has a little bit more fish in it. By the way, we just threw like 5 extra pieces in there, which is why it is cooking a little bit slower right now. So again, I mentioned this earlier, and I just did what I said not to do. But when we shallow fry stuff in a wok, the number one thing that's going to be like the most tempting thing to do is to fill the wok up because it's got this big old thing, and you want to throw in all the stuff in there. But as it fills up, you want to remember that the wok's temperature is also going to start dropping. So the more stuff that you put into it, the lower the temperature of the wok gets. So if we want to be frying on high, like extremely high heat, the wok's got to be relatively empty. So here we are with like a halfway full wok, which is suboptimal, but it should do fine. By the way, if your tongs, if you notice it splattering like that, what that's a sign of is that there's water going into the wok. The problem with tongs like this is that if you like rinse them off, you get water here. So if you ever reach into something and you notice it start to splatter, it means that there's water here in the tongs. So like water has gathered up here at the edge, and then when you tip it over, you're tipping over water into the wok. Which is how you get those really aggressive splatters, and that's where oil burns come from, which has happened to me a lot. So watch out for that. When you use tongs, make sure that they're fully dried off before you throw them in. Ooh, that's not what we're looking for. Yeah. Cool. Well, let's go and let's look over here. Check out our finished fish again. Once again, one more quick check in on our finished fish. So we have 2 batches of fish going on here. If we were really committed, we could be double frying, but I'm not going to double fry today because I don't really feel like it. It takes longer, and I don't feel like doing that. But here's our finished fish. If this was chicken, we will be checking the internal temperature right now because we will want to make sure that it had reached 165. That's like the #1 problem that I run into when I fry chicken is that we have to make sure that its internal temperature also reaches a certain temperature. With salmon, that's not actually that much of a concern because, again, you can eat salmon raw. So we're not too concerned. Mostly what we're just making sure is that it's cooked like the internal temperature, like texture is fine. But we don't have to make sure that it has reached a certain temperature like we do with fish, with the chicken, excuse me. Oh, that ought to do it. These tongs are getting unusable. Cool. Ooh, yeah, delicious fat rendered inside of the salmon nugget. Yeah, that is what I'm looking for. I guess that's another good reason why you should keep this salmon skin on. It's because it's also where all of the fat lives in your salmon. So if you want to retain that fat, which I always am a proponent of retaining the fat in any cut of meat that you're looking for, is if you cut that skin off, what you're cutting off is all of the fat, which is where all of the flavor comes from. So if you've ever had like salmon that's like dry and like kind of like, yeah, like dry and chewy, that's because they cut the skin off, which is terrible. Sorry, I'm reading some of these chats backwards, so. Right. Need another dry wrap here. This one. We're gonna use the rack to our air fryer because I don't feel like getting the big dry rack out. I don't like using those things. I don't like the giant dry racks because I find that they're really annoying to clean. Right, because they don't fit in the sink. So we're using the dry rack for the air fryer right now. I think that's gonna be fun though. Guess we could have tried to air fry these, huh? Cool. Alright, one more batch. Alright. Yeah, cool. Alrighty. So we're on to our last batch. I know this is taking a little while, but we're on to our last batch of salmon here. Then we're gonna pull everything out and then get on with our stir fry. Which, by the way, the stir fry element is gonna happen really quickly. So as we start cooking, that last stir fry element is gonna happen in like under 5 minutes, I think. Cool. All right, let's wrap this up. All right, so real quick, let's check in on our finished fish. While that's going. Then the last thing that I'm going to do before we head over and start stir frying here is we want to remove this fryer oil. So if you want, I see lots of people try and fry with their fryer oil. So like continue on with the stir fry without really changing the oil. In some, you might be able to get away with that, but generally with, I think, like a salt and pepper fish, you probably don't want to try and reuse that oil because it's going to color the thing that you're cooking because it is quite dirty. Remember that you just fried a whole bunch of stuff in it. So if we don't change that fryer oil, it's going to definitely leave like a dark stain to our finished dish. So what I like to do, I've got this jar here. I like to pour off that used fryer oil if you have extra oil sitting around in your wok. We don't want that to get into our stir fry because it's going to color the fry. Cool. So last up, what we're going to do is we're finally getting to our stir fry here. So we're going to do a couple of elements. The first thing that we want to do, because I just cleaned out this wok, is we want to burn off all of the water that's still in the wok. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to stir fry properly in it. Alright, so you might notice that as we start going on with the wok fry here, this last portion of our cook is going to start happening really quickly. Last part, maybe 5 minutes, sometimes even less than that. So here it is. First is our garlic, followed by our ginger, and finally here's our chilies. This is, by the way, a combination of jalapeños and seed-in Thai chilies, which again, if you're using, once again, by the way, if you're using Thai chilies and you don't take those seeds out, make sure that you get your windows open when that happens, because that stuff is really caustic to start breathing in. So I'm going to let that fry. I like to give it maybe, for jalapeños, I like to give that a good minute head start before we do anything else here, because we want that jalapeno to really penetrate. So next up, here's the sauce element, and once again, we want to remember that our sauce is mostly vinegar. So as we start boiling things off here, the main thing that we want to pay attention to and make sure happens is we want to start boiling off a lot of the acidity of that vinegar, because if we don't cook off some of that acidity, it's going to be pretty harsh and a little bit unedible. So I like to give that maybe a minute or so, and that's just to sort of burn off some of that acidity. The other thing that we're doing is we want to cook off a little bit of that moisture. If we throw our fish back into the wok at this point, we're going to start doing a little bit of boiling action going on, which is not a good thing when you're frying. This is also true with glazes, stuff like fried chicken, glazed chicken, stuff like that. You want to reduce that glaze, reduce your sauces really well before you add that fried element back. Otherwise, things are going to start boiling and you're going to get into like soggy territory, which is never attractive. Yeah. No. So there's our fish going in. I'm gonna do a real quick toss here. And that is really it. So last thing that we want to do anytime that we're cooking in woks, especially carbon steel woks like this one, so we want to give that wok a real good rinse before it heads back into storage. You don't want to leave anything residual on carbon steel, otherwise it starts oxidizing, which is how you end up with like all of those really gnarly stains on carbon steel. Anytime that you see poorly maintained carbon steel, that's what's going on. It's that somebody left it in standing water, which is like, for example, if you had carbon steel that you leave in the dish rack, for example, that's how you oxidize carbon steel. You don't want that. So what I like to do is just throw it back on the fire, and that's just going to kind of like cook off any of the water that might be still remaining on it. Like so. So I like to eat this over a little bit of rice. If you want, you can just serve it straight up and you can just start eating it like that. Pascal, oh yeah, thank you, Pascal. Thanks for tuning in. I'm glad you found the channel. Hello to everyone just joining too. That's cool. I'm glad that people are discovering it. Oh yeah, that is real good. Very nice. I like that. No one can cook, yeah. Exactly. Cool. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Tuesday at 6:30 PST with new recipes on my YouTube channel every Friday. So last Friday we came out with the recipe for this salt and pepper fish, which we had originally done with some catfish. We originally did it with catfish. Today we're doing it with some skin-on salmon, which I think actually turned out really good, and I'm very happy with the result. If you're looking for those recipes, they always live over on the YouTube channel, so if you haven't checked out the YouTube channel yet, definitely head over there and check out what's going on. We've got the new long-form recipes out every Friday, then those short recipes, the 1-minute versions, are coming out over on the YouTube Shorts every Monday. and then all of the music that comes out underneath all of the beats, underneath all the recipes are out every Wednesday. So if you're looking for that stuff, lots of content coming out on the channel every week. So definitely head out over there and check out what's going on, what's coming up next. This Friday coming up, we have Singapore street noodles, which is a PF Chang's hack. So we're hacking the Singapore street noodles from the PF Chang's menu, which is like the 5th thing that we've hacked from their menu now, and it's really tasty. Actually, that one actually came out really good. So I'm excited for that. You should be too. Definitely head over there and check out what's going on. We're working our way up to 6,500 subscribers by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and give it a subscribe. Lots of fun stuff coming up. Where's your bowl? Yeah. Definitely. Oh yeah, by the way, if you're here in the Bay Area, you can get some of the stuff that we're eating. We have this pop-up. It's coming up every Friday at Federation Brewing here in Oakland. So if you're here in the Bay Area, come find us. We're there every Friday, 3 p.m. to close. So come find us if you're in the Bay Area. Cool. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Head over to the YouTube, check out what's going on. We're working our way up to 6,500 subs. So if you want to help us hit the goal, please hop over and subscribe. Cool. All right. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Tastes like strawberries on a summer evening, and it sounds just like a song. I want more berries and that summer feeling. It's so wonderful and warm. Breathe me in, breathe me out. I don't know if I could ever go without. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know if I could ever go without watermelon sugar high, watermelon sugar high, watermelon sugar high, watermelon sugar high, watermelon sugar. Strawberries on a summer evening. Baby, you're the end of June. I want your belly and that summer feeling, getting washed away in you. Breathe me in, breathe me out. I don't know if I could ever go without watermelon sugar high, watermelon sugar high, watermelon sugar high, watermelon sugar high, watermelon sugar
and fall.